webinar. Sorry about that. So I just want to cover for the recording, we are going to cover the legislative requirements for making board appointments. We are going to cover some best practices for managing this transition, and we're going to talk about some resources that are available to you. So board appointments. Truly, despite what you've heard from other people about how they do it, there are some basic guidelines that the board appointments have to be done under the Public Libraries Act if you're a public library in Ontario. One point is, and I'm just going to state these out loud because I want to make sure everyone's clear on what they are. The current library board remains an active board until the new board is appointed. So on the day of the municipal election, the library board still operates. It's probably going to be in place until December at the earliest, maybe January, maybe February, and we'll talk about that time frame. But they don't. It's not like the municipal councils, and there isn't any lame duck period. I mean, you are the board until the new board is appointed. And the other thing is that library boards in Ontario do not appoint their own replacements. So despite what we're going to talk about board succession and finding good people, the actual appointments are always made, as the third point points out, library board appointments are always made by the establishing municipal council. So in some cases, I know there's a couple of you from county libraries. It would be the county council that makes the appointments if they establish the library. There's a couple of places where people have contracting municipalities, and that's a bit different. Usually there's a service contract and there's some terms in there about who appoints, but in the case of it's the library who has the library, the actual physical library, and the service contracts are only there if it's in the terms of their contract for library service. So the example today, I don't know if Kim's on today, but she talked about the Bancroft Library board members are appointed by the Bancroft Council, and Faraday gets one person on because they have a contract, and Limerick does not get any representation. That's what they wanted. That's their service agreement. So just ask any questions at the bottom. I'm just going to keep going through. But those are the three main points about appointing the library board members. And sometimes we hear people say, well, all my members are returning. Well, they have to go through the same process, whatever that process is in your municipality. They don't automatically get to stay on the library board. They have to go through that same process as everyone else. So the next point is that the Public Libraries Act, the library boards are appointed for the term of the appointing council. So sometimes we hear someone say, well, the municipal council guy is appointed for, or person is appointed for 1 year. Well, no, the term for library board appointments is 4 years, just like the municipal or county council. The legislation does say that the library board members may be reappointed for 1 or more terms. Some municipalities have put in a bylaw about how many terms, but in fact it doesn't say that in the legislation, that there are term references. So I leave it to you to decide, but if somebody questioned it, they could go back to the legislation. So the legislation doesn't put it specifically says you can be reappointed for 1 or more terms. So that's a different issue. And then the point that I've made already, current board members must apply to be reappointed in the same way as other candidates. So that's important. So the appointing council, municipal council, county council, whoever it is, must make the appointments to the library board at its first meeting. So the new municipal councils or county councils usually sit sometime after December 1st, and the meeting might be December 1st, it might be December 7th. You can make it at the first meeting or within 60 days after the first appointment. So when you think about the appointments, if the first meeting's December the 7th, you could wait till February 7th to get the appointments made, but that's the time frame. And then the notice of vacancy for board members has to be advertised so that any resident could apply. Some people are struggling because the legislation specifically says a newspaper of general circulation, and in some cases there is no newspaper anymore in print, and so they're kind of doing their best to use newsletters and things like that, however they can get the word out. However they normally get the word out is something that's better, because then everybody hears that there's a vacancy on the library board and they're looking for appointments or people to be appointed to the board. So just in terms of the actual composition of the board, the board must be composed of at least 5 members. So your bylaw might say there's 9 or there's 7 or there's however many, but the main point is some people don't specify how many members, and you have to appoint at least 5 members. So that's depending on whether you have a bylaw that states how many or whichever it is, you have to have 5 members. The appointing council can't appoint more of its own members to the board than the number is. Simple majority in the case of a county board, or 1 less than the majority in case of a public library board or union board. So if you have 5 members of a board, if 5 people appointed, only 2 could be municipal councillors. That's the way it works in terms of you can't appoint more municipal councillors or county councillors or however you do it than that majority, those 2 majority statements. This is all, everyone knows all this part, right? To be a board member, the person must meet specific qualifications. They have to be at least 18, they have to be a Canadian citizen, they have to be a resident, and then there's other criteria. They can be of the contracting municipality, and they can't be employed by the library board or in the union by any of the other affected municipalities. Now, I say this Canadian citizenship one because for the first time, and I've been doing this for 28 years, this is the first time we've had a question about, does it really say Canadian citizen? And it actually really does say Canadian citizen. And that may start presenting itself as a problem with people who are permanent residents and stuff, but it does say Canadian citizen. So the legislation was written in '84. I don't know why it says that, but that's what it says. So just think about that in terms of some of your residents and people applying for it. That is a criteria for it. And then the other thing I want to point out for the composition is to be very, very clear. We're going to talk about the board's succession piece in the next part, but in fact, the key here is that the Public Libraries Act only speaks to the fact that the council makes the appointments, when they make them, and then how you have to advertise for vacancies, how many people are on it, and who they have to be. It doesn't actually give you the details about the process that you have to go through. So, for example, the example I was given, there was one municipality where they asked in the job ad, it said, give in writing a resume with a covering letter explaining why you want to be in the library board. This was part of their process. And you have to submit it to the municipal clerk 15 days after the municipal election. And then the municipal clerk would sort them out, and then they would make a list for municipal council to decide. But in each case, they just have to set the process at each council, but they just have to make sure they have all of the other pieces, and then they're fitting the legislation pieces, and the process is not described in the legislation. So that's the difference. And Susan Ferguson has asked why must they not have to hold a library card in the library, and I don't know the answer to that. It's not a criteria for being a library board member. Do you have any thoughts on that, Henry?
No, I don't have any particular thoughts on why that is the case in the legislation. I will say that I think one of the advantages of that not being a requirement of getting onto the library board is simply because the library, unlike a lot of the other community services, that the library, in addition to serving its current user base, the legislation makes it clear that the library serves the community as a whole. And so in some ways, it's a good thing that people can be non-users can become board members. I mean, hopefully they become library users during that process, but I still think in principle it's a good thing that a non-user of the library can become a board member.
Okay. never had that question before, but it's an interesting one because we think of the library card as being very important. It's pretty broad what you can be to be a board member. Unfortunately, it doesn't say anything about reading or anything like that, So it is very, very basic. But anyway, we'll continue on, and you'll kind of see how this might fit together as one.
Somebody, I think, is using their keyboard really close to the phone, and you might have to use the *6 to mute your phone, because we're getting that keyboard activity. Thank you.
So the next part about this is we're calling it managing board succession, and it's covering the pieces that we think are quite important or could have an impact. So the key point here is that making appointments is the municipal council's responsibility, but you could have some influence on the shape of the next board. And that's why we haven't used library board must have an influence. You can have an influence because we want to make sure that it's clear that, the actual appointments is made, but the process is handled by the municipal council. But leading up to it and having an impact and getting good people in are things that we can maybe have some influence on. So that's what the next part is going to talk about. So at the bottom of this same screen, 2 types of work to undertake. One is preparing legacy documents from the outgoing board for the new board. And the second one is recruiting good people and advocating to municipal council for the appointment of qualified people to the board. And I think those 2 pieces are quite important steps, I think, to kind of keep it going. So the legacy document could be in several different forms. It is a communicate to future leadership, and it does provide an opportunity for the outgoing board to look at what they've done, say what they really did well. I love this ponder fortunate opportunities and lost changes or opportunities for change. And it gives the board a chance to look at how they work to overcome limitations but might not have been able to do it and maybe leave it, and that's why it's called a legacy document, because it does increase the potential of success for the future. So we'll look at legacy documents a little bit more carefully. You could choose it in different formats. Now, some of you who are CEOs or board chairs or board members would recognize what might work best for you. So I've called them 3 choices. The first one is if you have a current library strategic plan, you could, and you take the exercise of going through and reviewing what you've accomplished and what you haven't accomplished, you could take the opportunity to write a document about all the remaining things or what you still have to accomplish. Now, it depends on the cycle of your strategic plan. Some people's strategic plans are kind of ending now, and they're allowing the new board to think of a new strategic plan, and that's what their first order of business will be. But in that case, you wouldn't be able to leave them too much unless there was things outstanding that you didn't get done. But if you had a strategic plan and finished pretty well what you wanted to accomplish, it would be pretty hard. You might have some things you could pass on to the next board that was in the plan, and they could decide in the new strategic plan what they could cover or what's left if it's partway through. Another choice that we kind of like these days is we have a new 7th edition of the Ontario Public Library Guidelines, and you could go through a self-assessment of the library using, there's 2 tools, one is Word and one is in Excel. You could go through and figure out if there was some outstanding issues, maybe you were missing policies, and even for those people who've been through the accreditation process, you could see maybe there was 2 or 3 things left over from the Ontario Public Library Guidelines that you passed, but you have a few more things to do. That might be an opportunity to give a communique to the future board. And the next one is there is a possibility of a separate standalone legacy document that can be passed along. Now, the one that you'll see in the next page is one that was used, I think it was 2 elections ago when we had this thing called networking with our peers for those people who have been around a long time. It looks like this. And we have it in a Word version. It's also posted on our website. There's actually 2 screens. So I don't know whether anyone's tried this tool. And Emery, I don't know whether you want to speak to what you've seen in terms of this tool. but it's something that the board could complete on its own individually or as a group. And do you want to speak to what you've seen in this terms of how people have used this legacy document?
I have seen libraries, but not recently. So I certainly can't name particular libraries right now. But I think it's a good starting point. And it may be that you don't have answers for all of the prompts, but I think the idea is to at least start by looking at this document and see, what these questions or prompts do bring to mind. And then bottom line is a legacy document needs to talk, as Peggy said, what you're proud of, what you've been able to accomplish, and what you see as work still to be done, as well as work still to be done implies known work, but there's also just, you don't know what the work is yet, but you know that there's particular challenges or issues on the horizon coming your way. So from your board's perspective, to be able to point that out to a new board is hugely helpful. Saves them from having to find it out themselves.
Well, and I'll show you the next screen, but on this screen, the section Major Governance Issues Faced During the Term, I like the fact we were able to accomplish or we were not able to accomplish is both sides of the coin. And John's just asked the question, completed jointly or individually. I've seen it done both ways, and I think it's probably, because there are varying voices on your board, it's probably not a bad idea for everyone to take it home as homework to kind of come up with the ideas and then pull it into one document, but based on a discussion, but not completing it at the meeting, but you bring what you think are the important pieces. I mean, if you decide at the end of the day everyone has a different opinion, you could staple them all together and there you be. But I think the idea is that as a group it would be interesting to go through the exercise having done some homework. I'll just show you the next page. Where the first one is about our library and its community partners, then major governance issues. The next one is about our leadership and then challenges for the new board. And then the last piece is our wishes for the new board's success. So it has a range of questions, and as Anne-Marie said, there are some that you may not be able to answer, that are just, you just kind of think, we can't answer the question. Like, we see that the board could be even stronger in its leadership if. That's kind of an open question. There might be a couple that aren't as easy. The one on leadership might not be as easy to answer as you kind of think. But some of the challenges in this last section would be kind of interesting to pass along. So the idea, just going back over this one section, is if you could leave some kind of a legacy document, whether it's a review document from the strategic plan, whether it's a self-assessment of the public library guidelines, or whether it's this legacy document or some version of your own legacy document that you think are the important 5 points that you want to pass on to the new board, that's really helpful and would help in the transition to the new board. And then the new board can choose whether they look at it or not. So the second thing to help in the transition is recruiting good people. And I think there are 3 things that you really need to think about. Is you need to, we think, define the person you need, and then, if possible, meet with council, and it should really be and/or municipal staff. Some people can't get both. Council and/or municipal staff to discuss your needs, and then really getting the message out to the community about the opportunity to serve on the library board. You can't select your library board members, but you can certainly let people know, whether it's a notice on the library bulletin board to say that the library board terms are up. Just getting the message out, talking to people who are in the library. Getting the message out becomes a really important piece.
And Bob, can we go just back to that for a minute? Bob, from Clearview, had a question about just about that idea about how to recruit for board members, and especially in smaller communities. it can be really challenging. And he wondered if other libraries, especially in smaller communities, had success with various practices. You know, he talked about the possibility of an article in the newspaper with, you know, the tagline to call the library, you know, for more information or whatever. But does anybody have other ideas that and even better than ideas, things that have worked successfully in the past? It's a tough one, and maybe it's one that we can also ask at the upcoming round of trustee council meetings, Bob, and maybe we can get some ideas and suggestions. I mean, certainly it's, I mean, the one thing that comes to mind is just simply the word of mouth law, right? That you know, people. What about your library board just within your own personal networks? Is there anyone? And I think we tend to think of people on library board as being, you know, readers, but we need a broader base than that. So, you know, who do you know in your own circles? Who does the staff know in their own circles? I think it's a question that we'll continue to pursue, as I said, at the next round of trustee council meetings, and maybe we can have some suggestions up on our website.
And I think, too, the other thing is one of the suggestions from the meeting I was at today was they actually always put a notice in the library itself, because the minimum requirement is some kind of advertisement by the municipality, whether it's on their website, their web board, their newsletter, their whatever, newspaper, whatever, that advertising. But they felt that at the library there should be a posting as well, and then see if, you know, that somebody who's passing through might see it where they don't kind of maybe see it in the other light, the other piece. So that could be an important piece. Now, Andrew has just, and I'll get to your question, Susan. Sorry, I'll come back to that. But you're right, looking at the strat plan to see if there's a specific need, like looking for a fundraiser, lawyer, business person. And that's part of the defining the person you need, figuring out what you need from your strat plan or just from library experience. Oh, and Lauren said planning to post on our social media this time as well. So that's the same kind of thing in terms of doing it from, like, the municipality has a formal process where they collect them, but that's part of getting the word out, is doing it the other way, where you let people know who might be passing through, and therefore if they're at the library they might have an interest in the library. They're not saying that's the only people who can apply for the board, but they might have an interest in serving on the library board, and so that might be a helpful way to get the word out on it. So again, you can see the pieces. Mm-hmm.
I would also been thinking about getting outgoing board members to use their social media, you know, to just say what a positive experience it's been, assuming it has been a positive experience, which is what I am assuming. But I think that outgoing board members, just a short little statement about what a rewarding experience it was, or what a learning experience was, what a great way to get to know the community, whatever. Getting outgoing board members and then quoting them, rather, on social media posts and that kind of thing.
And that's quite a good way to do it. There was one question, I don't want to lose it up further up. Susan is asking, the first part of your question, is there a period of grace before a retired library staff is considered for a board position? There is no grace period in the legislation. And should there be a period of grace, it's probably good practice to do that, because there's nothing, you know, someone who's worked there for a long time might not have the be able to step away from the workings of that library board. I've heard of people working on another library board that's quite different than working on your own library board, but there is no restriction. So at the end of the day, you collect all the names, and if there are 5 retired staff people who want to be on the board, those names go to the municipal council, and under the legislation, the municipal council picks who they pick. And we can talk about, there's another question about board member job description and who's best and how you meet with them.
Yeah.
But there is, at the end of the day, no legal restriction, to be honest about that question.
Paul says it should be 25 years. I agree.
We'll get that. If you look at the chat in the bottom right, I think, Paul, you're, and I think, Paul, the other point you're making is the balance of new and returning. That's not a bad way to do it, because this board legacy document, I have heard from a couple of people who are, I have suggested a legacy document, and they say, oh, well, there's enough people on the board that are expecting to return, and therefore they're going to do it verbally when they get back on. But again, that's kind of a weird way to assume that you're going to be on, because you don't know whether you're going to be on at the end of the day, and that's where you get into the balance of new and returning. But so we'll talk about defining the person you need. Those points that are there are quite useful. And Kathy has asked, has anyone put together a board member job description? There are several around, and we have, Emery will talk about it at the end, but we've posted a couple of, well, one sample I think there is now for a board member job description. So these are more beyond being 18, beyond being a Canadian citizen and a resident. These are the things that are generally believed to be good qualities. So those are useful things to remember. And the next thing that we talk about when you try to get good people is, if you get a chance or you get the opportunity to meet with the council and municipal staff, you can go through these 4 pieces, sharing those qualities you need, reminding them that the library CEO, if they want to go on a tour first, if they want to find out what's happening. I know some libraries have prepared, they've got the package, the board member job description and some other pieces, and that if somebody expresses an interest and wants to know, that the library has posted all of those pieces, so reminding the municipal council that you can go back. And Ellen, I thought you might come up with London has a position description. We stole it, and it's on our website with permission.
We didn't steal it. We have permission.
Yeah, so because it was one of the really good ones for the position description, so. We have that with
we even have the updated version.
Yes, so that's the one we used as the position description, and Anne-Marie will talk about that later, because London had posted an older one, and then 2017, and now has a 2018 one. So they keep it up to date, so somebody who was interested in going for the position. But the applications usually go to the municipal clerk, so you have to make sure that they're aware. In some of the smaller communities, there's so many things for a clerk to do that they forget that the library board needs appointments as well, and so sometimes they
and that's
those steps.
That's the other thing I like about London's approach, is that they've posted this material on their website and everything, but they've also been proactive in writing a letter to the municipal clerk. So even if you can't get that visit that Peggy was talking about, that sit-down meeting or whatever, taking the opportunity to write the municipal clerk, acknowledging, what a busy time it is to be appointing all these boards and commissions, et cetera, and offering some assistance in providing some guidelines around the kinds of candidates. And as Peggy said, we certainly have posted some suggestions around what some of those, what some of the wording might look like for posting those competencies or skills and abilities that you're looking for in a board member.
So the third point about notifying those who've expressed interest, so say you have a poster at the library, about serving on the library board to make sure that they get their applications in, because lots of people talk about it, what a great idea, but they need to, and the application is kind of a general term. It's in whatever form it's supposed to be. I know sometimes it's just an email, sometimes it's just a letter, sometimes it's a resume, sometimes it's a form to fill out. But the word application is used to represent whatever your municipality or council, county council wants the applications to be in. And they go to the appropriate office. It says town office, but it could be the whatever you have, township office, municipal office. That's what it means. So just make sure they get it done. Make sure they actually put in their application, because that's the only way the clerk or whoever is collecting them. Sometimes it's an appointments clerk, and the bigger municipalities and the smaller ones, it's the CAO. They have to get a list that goes to municipal council for the appointments to be done. And then in this whole piece about, the last point is in this whole piece about municipal elections and reappointing, you kind of want to encourage some of the councillors, especially the ones who are interested in the library, to consider serving on the library board, because sometimes they get choices of representation. But as I said, there are, I don't know how many municipalities in Ontario, and you don't always have the same system working in each one. But it is kind of nice when you can sort of see that a councillor who is appointed or is elected gets appointed to the library board. That's really helpful. Okay, so the next one, and here kind of gets into a little bit getting the message out, searching for potential trustees. So we've sort of looked at the kind of person you want on it. You can invite those people to attend a board meeting as an observer. They, of course, would have no vote, but it's a public meeting. Anyone can come to the meeting, and some people kind of see what it's like, and it may be too much of a governance board for them. They were hoping for a hands-on kind of board. But if they observe a meeting, they might get a sense of how it works, because I don't know about you, but most library boards don't have a lot of people sitting in the public gallery unless there's something very, very contentious. And then sometimes, of course, where you find them, sometimes we talked about this already, but busy people sometimes are the best board members because they're incredibly organized, and you might find them, maybe they're coming off another board and are interested in serving the community. I think it's really important when you get the message out to the community to define the commitment that they have. And this is where I think, Andrew was talking before about you might need a fundraiser, you might need a lawyer, you might need a chairperson. I think there are certain, if people know the background and then some of the skills that you're looking for and then the direction you're heading in, I think those are all kind of important pieces for defining the commitment that's required of a library board member. And I think sometimes people think it's just a 1-hour commitment, but there's often a lot of reading and preparation and thought that needs to go into it, and those are the best board members if you can kind of make sure they understand what they're getting into. All right. And then, as we talked about, just encouraging people to apply for it. This is sort of getting the message out. There was one suggestion that you actually have an article in the local newspaper about the library board appointments and what a trustee does. If you happen to have a local newspaper left, you can talk about that a little bit. Not everybody reads the local newspaper. We all know that in print, but it's not a bad idea. And I think I think, Lauren, you were going to get out in social media and just to kind of get the word out about that you're looking for people, because sometimes it's not on anyone's radar. And then the last one, potentially hold an information session. It might not fly. I think one-on-one is often better. Information session, there's nothing worse than organizing an information session and 2 people come. It's a bit disheartening, but one-on-one is useful as well. Again, you can put your comments out there. I should stop at this one. Does anyone have any specific questions about the appointment process or getting the message out to the community?
It might be a good time, if I can just jump in with the other question that we had in advance. That's a particular situation. And this is Donna writing, that new board and with combined with a new CEO who will be leading whom. And I think it's an important question to put out there because there's a number of libraries that are going to be going to have new CEOs as well as new boards. And it is one area where I think it might be worth having that conversation with your current board that, Paul raised the point about balance, but in a particular case like this, you really do want some continuity. So I'm not saying you want the entire board to return, but it's a situation where that balance piece is really important, and so that if at least a couple of board members are around the table are not going to be brand new to the library board discussions and decisions and everything, I think that would be a real asset, and I think that's something that's worth communicating to council, the particulars of that situation. I mean, there's more to be said about that situation, but ultimately, the literature in not-for-profit, and we have a bunch of CEOs on the phone, and we have a bunch of board members on the phone, so this might be a contentious thing to say, but the reading I have done, put it this way, indicates that in most cases it is up to the executive director or the CEO to ensure that the library board is as successful as it can be. So that brand new CEO has to figure that out as well. However, practically speaking, some seasoned board members can go a long ways to help in that situations, because who will be leading whom is a really good question and well worded, because I think it is about leadership, and I think the leadership will go in both directions. But as I say, some continuity on the part of some board members would be really helpful.
That's actually really good information, because sometimes it's tricky to figure out what the balance should be, even older and newer folks. There's just two more comments, just stepping back a little bit. Andrew and Elise and Alyssa have posted two pieces. So if you get a chance to look down in the corner, Andrew's saying they had an information session prior to a board meeting, and people could stay and observe the meeting. And so that was really good. And the other one met from Niagara Falls, doing one-on-one with respect to meeting with new potential board members, and has prepared packages, and they've had tour of the facility, and I think most importantly, which is what we were talking before, making sure that they understand the commitment that they've made, the time involved specifically. That I think is really important, because otherwise the meetings will always be there'll always be a problem, because you won't have that commitment to the work that's being laid out.
Lynn is sharing an excellent idea here about for libraries that are giving tours and doing other community gathering types of activities during Ontario Public Library Week anyways in October. It's a great opportunity to also talk about what the role of the library board is, and to encourage. It's tight, possibly. I don't know, depending on what the timing is, but I think there's still time there for them to apply. So that's a great idea.
Well, and I think it's important, actually, Lynn, each local municipality will decide what the timing is. So the notices, there isn't a time period that the notices have to be in the newspaper. So you kind of think that they might not be posted, although I could be wrong. and we'll get to some of the other suggestions, but you post in the newspaper, some of them post in mid-November, and then they say they want them by the end of November. That doesn't give them a chance to make the appointment at the first meeting, but those are the ones who are probably going to make it a little later. Some do it right as soon as the municipal election is over because the actual asking for the library board has no bearing on the municipal election. It just triggers it, but it doesn't have to be connected to that. So in fact, someone could be making the newspaper advertisements right now and putting them in the newspaper right now. It's just that the appointments are done by the new municipal council. So if you did the newspaper ads or however you're using social media right now or whatever, you could have them running till, whenever you need to, because sometimes the process, depending on what happens at your municipality, whether it's interviews or whether it's just asking questions or there's an information session. And Margie's saying that the city has a public open house for all boards and committees and people can come and talk about it. So you'd need to kind of know who was applying for the board that was interested. So again, that timing is not stated in the Act. It's just when the appointments are made. And they technically could start December 1st, but they could be done in February. So Anne-Marie, do you want to speak to the other ones just above there? There was a comment. Thank you.
So in Niagara, they are planning an area-wide board orientation in April, and in the Niagara area, the CEOs also attend that area-wide board orientation session. So yes, that's a really good opportunity. And the upside of having a new CEO and new board is just that there's a clean slate or an almost clean slate to forge new relationships, carrying the library into the future. And that also can have its benefits. So was there something else? So yeah, we are also at SOLS looking at doing orientations in a way that bring board and CEO together. So I think that's some good possibility and synergies there. And yeah, as Margie said, I think if for the library to be included and be part of anything that's happening municipally around all boards and commissions, that's great to be part of that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm just going to take a few minutes now here to give you an overview of the approach that SOLS is taking to providing governance information and governance support over the coming, for however long. We've made a concerted effort. I don't know how many of you have actually seen the new SOLS website. I'm just going to click ahead for a minute there. It looks quite different than the old one. And these icons here is an attempt to focus your reason for visiting the website. And so for the first time ever, in the bottom left-hand corner, we actually have a button for boards and trustees. So for the first time ever, Yay. Board members will know from the top level right away where to go. So I keep going to click, but these are screen captures. The clicking is just not working.
No, your screen is saying your screen is black. Oh, I don't know. Mine.
Mine's looking okay. How about others? Everybody else still have the slide up? Okay. Others are fine. Okay. So I'm not sure.
I don't know if you're looking, Lisa, at if you're sitting at a screen, but you could go to the actual SOLS website because Anne-Marie will talk about 3 screens if you're stuck. If you're at a computer, just as an option. The slides will be available. We'll show them to you. But
yeah, we're going to share. We will share the slides and the information. So bottom left-hand corner, boards and trustees. And when you click there, you will be given this page with these 3 main choices. The ones on the left are the trustee council meetings and then the discussion lists associated with those trustee council meetings. In the middle is Understanding Library Board Governance, and that's where I'm going to take you in a minute. On the right-hand side right now is a new topic that we've put up there just temporarily around the board transition piece. And so that is so that we can share the materials from this webinar as well as other materials that come along, and also just make sure that you're aware of the library's vote.ca website, so making sure that you have access to OLBA's resources as well as FOPL and Ontario Library Service North. So the middle choice here is Understanding Library Board Governance. This is going to be, clicking on here is going to be the hub, the governance hub. And we don't quite have this figured out yet, but the next, when you click here, the next level is going to be, again, some more icons that's going to allow you to, the hot topics choices way in. But eventually, you're going to end up accessing these roles, this degree of information. And so whereas in the past we had a binder, and most of you probably remember the binder that was pretty thick and had a lot of really, really good information in it. And we tried to, essentially in most cases, we tried to go through the binder at the orientation sessions, at least a good part of it. And so what we've realized is that that binder spoke a lot more to the ongoing development and life cycle of the board, and that in terms of orientation, we really need to put a sharper focus on what board members need to know from day one in order to function and be operating in the best interest of the library from day one. So we're taking that approach to orientation, and we're working on a document that right now is called, it's very draft, and it's called 10 Things You Need to Know as a New Library Board Member. And it will be featured within this governance roles and responsibilities. But we're really trying to pull together all of the information around this incredibly vast, complex topic of governance and library board governance, and trying to provide the best subject access we possibly can, because we know that when most of you need governance information beyond the basics, it's because something particular is happening in your library. It's time to do a performance appraisal of the CEO, for example, then that's when you want to know information and guiding principles and best practices for CEO performance review, performance appraisal. If it's something else happening, it's a building project, then you've got entirely different questions and different needs for information. So we're trying to approach it both ways. We're trying to approach a governance overview for everyone for those who want to see the whole big picture, but we also are trying to provide better subject access than we've ever provided before, so that people can find the information they need when they need it. And it won't just be information that we've produced. You can see down here at the bottom of the screen just OLBA's cut to the chase. Just for example, we will be incorporating and integrating publications of OLBA, FOPL, OLS North, and in some cases we will also be linking to other resources for general not-for-profit sector, as well as resources from other library organizations. So we haven't quite found that catchy title, so I'm calling it the Governance Hub right now, but we really are hoping that board members will come here for questions and for getting the information they need at the point of need, and that we are collaborating with the other partner agencies in developing this resource. And if you look down at the blue menu items on the left, you will see that the third from the bottom, I guess, is a section on, excuse me, board orientation and ongoing development. I just need to take a drink. So in that section, we will share ideas and suggestions for board orientation, as well as opportunities and possibilities for ongoing board development. I'm just thinking, what other do I want to highlight? Oh,
I just wanted to point out one thing, just on the screen before.
Yep.
I put the screen back to Emery's talking about the middle one called Understanding Library Board Governance. Under Board Transition, since we've made up this slide, we've actually we posted the notes from the appointments to the library board, which is another way of looking at the webinar material, not in PowerPoint, but in our Word version. And there's another document that's now been posted called Board Succession, which is some of the notes and ideas, and a copy of the London Public letter and things like that are sitting under Board Transition for now. So eventually they'll be, we just thought people wanted them sooner rather than later, so we just parked them there. So there's one called Appointments to the Library Board, there's one called Board Succession, there's one called Board Orientation, but it's just very much the basics. We'll be adding to it as we go. And I think that's the key, is we want to make sure that we have enough information. Board transition is important now, but understanding library board governance will become really quite important shortly.
Yeah,
very shortly.
Yeah, and we will. We are hoping to have all of our content. Well, I won't say all, because we see this as dynamic and it will be interactive, so it will be changing on an ongoing basis. But the core material will all be ready by December 1st. Which should then be plenty of time for board appointments and the board's first meeting in the new year. So, yeah, so this is what it's going to look like, but we are also going to be providing, as I said, some icons with some of the more popular topics that will, from that earlier screen, that we haven't yet designed but will. The other thing I wanted to just point out too is that we've singled out the library board CEO relationship as one area that we really want to pay a lot of attention to. Certainly as SOLS consultants, when we're called in to try to help sort out and resolve in a positive way library board issues, they often come back to this piece around the library board CEO relationship. So that's one that is going to be highlighted in our governance material, and it's also going to be highlighted in our orientation sessions that we will be doing in the spring of 2019. Just the importance of that partnership, and that partnership that's based on a mutual respect and trust and understanding of each other's roles and responsibilities. Any questions about that? So it really does come down to, just as a summary slide, it really does come down to creating doing the groundwork to give the new board members, when they arrive, what they need. And so, we've developed a list here, and by no means is it exhaustive. There might be other things. Actually, I did find a not-for-profit board members, or was it a library board? No, it was not-for-profit board members Bill of Rights, and I think I did post it in this, so it will be interesting to compare. But education and information chunked and delivered gradually over time, and certainly that's what we're trying to do around our new approach of the 10 things you need to know. Inspiration. New board members really need to hear those positive impact stories, outcome stories. They really need to get a crash course in how the library is making a difference, that real social impact, something to believe in. A snapshot of the library and a library card. There you go, Susan. We can't necessarily make it a requirement for getting on the board, but we can certainly encourage joining the library once they are a board member. Some kind of a buddy system or other mentoring from the board members who have been on the board before. But at the same time, a new new board member needs a one-on-one meeting with the CEO, just an opportunity to sit down, get to know each other, and hear directly from the CEO about their view of the library board and how it all works and everything. The opportunity to get to know other board members and to keep getting to know, right? That's not a one-time thing, but just the odd social piece added to a board meeting or the annual Christmas meeting or whatever, but some social element that allows board members to get to know each other. Access to more resources, and that's what that is what SOLS is working on, and we will continue to keep you updated as we get more resources and as we release parts of the governance hub going forward. And then as that ongoing board development that we already talked about. So Joy has here, take some time to understand the workings of the libraries. New trustees should feel at ease that they need time. Yeah, absolutely. It does take time, and there is a prioritization in terms of what you need to know in order to be sitting at a board table and being able to participate meaningfully. And I think that's the mistake we used to make. Seriously, we used to, I think, give people all of the governance information we knew and really try to pass that on, realizing and not realizing that piece that you're talking about, Joy, that it does take time and we need to allow it to take time. And that's why Paul's point is important about having that balance of new and returning, if possible. Again, it's not within your control, but you can ask for that kind of balance and hope that some board members are planning to return. Okay, so we will, as I say, continue to communicate with you. Starting with, we're having this webinar again on Wednesday afternoon. So following the 2 webinars, we will send out an email with links to some of the things we've talked about, and to particularly on our SOLS page and everything. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. I hope it was helpful. So look for more announcements and information in the weeks to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will be terminated in 5 minutes.